I really want to dive headfirst into one of the hugest problems that I consistently see when it comes to the spiritual industry, the personal development world, and just being in this industry for over, I don't even know how many years at this point. That's besides the point. I want to talk about one of the biggest problems that I consistently see over and over again with clients, with people, with friends, with everyone, and that's disconnection. So let's deep dive into exactly what it looks like and how we can start to heal it. So let's dive in. Hey guys, it is Ashley from theawakenedstate.net, and I want to emphasis here that society at large has been, what the fuck, guys? It's been fucking crazy out there. I'm tired. You're tired. It's been a lot with the astrology stuff that's happening and all of the global pandemic things that are happening, and then war, and then all of the triggering things that have also been happening. It's a lot on people's minds, bodies, and it's leaving us incredibly, incredibly disconnected from ourselves. And because of this, I really wanted to dive headfirst into this topic. Disconnection. What the heck is disconnection, and why is it such a problem? Disconnection is a huge problem in our entire industry and just with the world at large, because we have become disconnected from ourselves. And because we become disconnected from ourselves, it puts us in a state of survival. It puts us in a dysregulated state in our nervous system. And why we feel disconnected is at the root a spiritual problem. Because if you think about it, disconnection is literally the sensation of feeling disconnected from your spiritual self. It is the disconnection point between the spiritual self and the physical self. Every time we feel that we are in past and future thinking, every time that we kind of fall down the rabbit hole of overthinking, anxiety, fear, doubt, overwhelm, getting stuck in uncertainty, all of these emotions that are coming at us are a sign that we are disconnected from our soul. We are disconnected from who we truly are inside, our authentic self, who lives beyond conditioning. Now, when we experience disconnection, a lot of the times what we'll notice is that we have many different signs and symptoms appear because of that. Now, before we dive into the signs, the number one thing I also want to mention is when it comes to knowing disconnection, we have to also realize, well, what the heck is disconnection? Disconnection is literally dysregulation of your nervous system, where the mind and the body become disconnected. I always like to call it the mind-body disconnect. It's actually something we're going to be diving headfirst into on my new live event, Reconnect, Return to Self. And I hope you're going to be there because we are going to dive into some heavy, epic topics on how to establish radical reconnection to yourself. And it's an incredible resource to learn how to regulate yourself, to strengthen your intuition, to rebuild that connection to your authentic self. So I hope you'll be there inside of Reconnect, the live event here on YouTube. So I'm very excited to dive headfirst into that. But to just stay on topic, when it comes to looking at the mind-body disconnect, we have to realize that the mind-body connection is always happening. So the mind is connected to the body, is connected to the soul. And so when the mind is linked with the body and the mind believes in what the body believes, those two work in tandem together and influence your reality. So, the mind has a thought, it believes something, the body's response holds on to that energetic charge, that memory of association of your past, and it becomes an attraction point, because what ends up occurring is the body still believes even if the mind doesn't believe. So the body holds the show. The body holds the score. And basically, the hugest problem we see out in the spiritual circles is this approach to top-down spirituality instead of bottom-up spirituality, where we are completely dismissing the body and we're just trying to work with the mind. I think we've all can say here that we're a little bit all guilty of this. But what we learn more about the body is that when we have, this connection to somatics and body awareness and getting in touch with our emotions, all of us are radically disconnected from the realization that we are just using our mind and we're not tapping it back into the body. And that's how the mind-body disconnect actually occurs. Is you think that you're using your whole system, but in reality, you're just using the mind. Or say you're like you're a hardcore exercise person and you disconnect from the mind versus the body, where you're really in the body, but you're not actually using that as fuel to the mind. A really good example here is like maybe someone who tries to create a lot of physical change, but inside they're telling themselves, I hate myself, I hate the way I look, I don't think anyone loves me, and so forth. So their mind is a mess, but they're still committed to the actions. So they're taking the actions, they're trying to create some external change in their life, but everything reverts because the mind isn't actually on board either. So you have this differentiation between how we can have a mind-body disconnect happen in reverse, where we have the physical things happen, but we're not actually linking the mind. And then we also have the sensation of manifestation circles where we just focus on the mind and we don't focus on the body. And this is also in relationship to healing work where we just focus on the mind and we don't focus on the body. And that also creates a disconnect. So you can have different situations happening depending on your circumstances, your body, your health, and so forth, your general conditioning. Okay, so when we look at the mind-body disconnect as a concept, this is where we start to see that dysregulation start to occur. And so that's when the signs start to show up. And so a lot of signs where you might not realize that you are disconnecting from yourself can show up in a variety of ways that might be fully unconscious to your daily actions. And that's where it gets kind of tricky and a little bit of a slippery exploration, because you can start to understand yourself mentally, but the body is behaving differently. So if you were to just take a minute here, and we're going to just do a mini exercise right here. And I want you to consider a time when maybe you were drastically overthinking. And what happened in the body? A lot of the times, what happens when we drastically overthink about a certain situation is the body freezes. And it freezes in overwhelm or anxiety or fear and so forth. So it could be something very basic, but you're still afraid. And so the body's response becomes, I'm going to stay stuck. So if you were to just take a minute here and start to play with me here and think about how when you have an experience where you're not overthinking and what happens, what generally happens to you. So if you were to just think about it like this, it's like, I know for me, I would be breathing normally, I would be regulated, and I'd be inspired to take action. And I would be in a place of almost like an intuitive led action. Like, hey, that's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? I should film that video. And so there's a natural flow to that action. Whereas if you were to just compare yourself to the overthinking Ashley, that person is drastically going to be in overwhelm. And maybe she's afraid, maybe she's anxious, maybe she's doesn't know if this is the right choice or not. So she's weighing the pros and cons. There's a lot of indecision going on, which is influencing the intuition. And so what's happening behind the scenes is the mind is starting to disconnect. And The mind is starting to disconnect from the body. The mind goes faster than the body. And then what we have here is the mind-body disconnect. We have my racing thoughts are now disconnecting from my actions. So now I don't feel safe to take those actions forward. So what I've learned is that when this sensation is going on, this is disconnection. This is disconnection from your soul, from your intuition, from your regulated present self in your body. So this is why embodiment practices are so radically popular right now, because we're noticing that, hey, we've grown up in a society that's heavily dysregulated. And now we're learning how to pick back the pieces from that. And when we start to look at spirituality as a whole from that top-down approach, what's occurring? Well, if we were to go back to that exercise, what are you feeling in your body? Invite it in. What are you feeling in your body when you are in that state of overwhelm? Where is it coming from? Is it coming from the solar plexus? Is it coming from the heart? Is it coming from low in your chest? Is it coming from your head? Are you suddenly getting a headache? So you can connect it back to almost a particular chakra. And you can notice how that particular sensation is coming from a place in your body, such as fear or doubt, anxiety, and so forth. And that is influencing the whole show. And that's why the mind-body disconnect happens, because of that survival state of consciousness and not feeling safe in the body. And then we don't fully regulate. And then that is what starts to ease us back into this path of lack of momentum. And that lack of momentum is what naturally stops us from taking any action forward. And that's where things get stuck. And that's when things slow down. And that's when we start to feel unmotivated and sluggish and fearful and so forth. So if you were to just play with that same scenario and you think about the regulated self, right? Okay, so the regulated self, this person, what do they feel in their body? And I want you to try this exercise at home. The next time you feel like you are stuck in overwhelm, you're analyzing yourself, you're critiquing yourself, what are you feeling in your body? Because immediately that will help bring the awareness out of the head back into the body, into what you're actually feeling, in the sensation of where it's coming from will tell you so much about what needs to heal, what needs to shift, and so forth. Now, if we look at the regulated person, who is, well, I guess in this case, it was me in this scenario. That person is in a flow state of consciousness. So they feel maybe happy. They feel content. They feel peaceful. They might feel confident. They might feel in their body, in their solar plexus, empowered to move forward. And so forth. So there's a different sensation and a feeling that's happening in the body. And this is why you can visibly feel if you are contracting or expanding. And so when I invite you to explore this sensation, because we think it's coming just from our intuition, but it's also a sign of disconnection and reconnection. And when you think about that sensation in your body, what is happening behind the scenes? The energy is contracting or expanding. So it's contracting in fear and going into reserve mode, or it's expanding into your present self and expanding into the world around you, expanding that energy and so forth. So your parasympathetic nervous system turns on, you feel regulated, you feel ready to take the action, you feel in tune with your body and so forth. When that isn't happening, we're stuck in fear, we're stuck in survival and so forth. So the sensation alone is different. And I invite you to physically feel it, because once you start to be aware of it, then we can start to work with it. Then we can start to change it. And so that leads me into what are some of the automatic signs that you can start to look for if you are in disconnection. So let's dive into exactly what that looks like. Okay, so here are some of the signs that you may be in disconnection. You wake up and automatically you feel anxious or exhausted, and you don't even know why, but you thought you just got a full night of sleep, and you wake up exhausted. You wake up anxious. That is a sign that you are disconnected. Now, here's the thing. When I go through these signs, I want you to just feel into sensations that are coming up in your body and also if they immediately resonate, because this will help you figure out where it's coming from, how you can start to shift it, and so forth. Okay, another huge common one is you start a practice. It's good for a few days, but you notice that there's a deep inconsistency, and then you suddenly start to fall off, or you make up excuses and so forth. And then eventually you just abandon the practice. This is very common with spiritual practices that do not connect to our intuition type. And I have a very important quiz for you around the empath type quiz if this is what you are experiencing. Because you can find that your intuitive type, your specific empath gift, might not respond to that specific practice. And that can also influence how you're showing up to your spiritual practice. Another common one is your mind won't stop looping, ruminating, getting lost down rabbit holes, mentally spiraling, and questioning everything and trying to prove itself correct. And trying to prove itself correct is the sneaky one here, where you might not realize it, but you're trying to prove your fear wrong. You're trying to prove yourself right. And what ends up occurring is you're just trying to validate the experience. You're trying to validate the fear. And so you get stuck in a loop here of overthinking, like a cognitive loop of just ruminating on a certain topic, over analyzing a certain topic. Maybe you run it through your head a bunch of times. I mean, I know I've done that with boys many times where it's just like, did I say that right? I need to analyze the entire situation all over again. It's like, did I really say that? Did I hurt his feelings? Was I supposed to say that? Yeah, that is a sign that you're disconnecting from yourself. Another thing that can happen is you try to raise your vibrations. We try to be positive, but your nervous system is stuck in pure survival. You're in fear, you're in doubt, you're in uncertainty, but you're trying to raise your vibrations anyway. And what ends up happening is the moment that you have a negative thought, the moment if you have a negative feeling, what happens in your body? You feel shameful, you feel wrong, you feel like this, isn't me. You almost disconnect from the identity of the emotion, because what's happening is you're in such a chronic survival mode that you are dissociated from your own feelings. And a lot of this comes back to emotional regulation. We will explore that on another day, but when that is happening behind the scenes is we feel shame. We feel upset that we're having anger. We feel there's an undercurrent of heaviness when we experience the negative emotion. Whereas, I'm angry today. I'm going to move through this and then I'll be fine by next, Tuesday. And whereas when someone is trying to be in almost that toxic that toxic positivity place, they find that the negative emotion is heavy, it has a lot of meaning, and it feels shameful to them because the body is in survival mode. Another one is you know that you're intuitive, you know that you're a beautiful, spiritual, special snowflake who's psychic, but you are constantly overthinking and doubting yourself and second guessing yourself, and you have lost trust with yourself. This is also a sign that you are disconnected. This one is very sneaky because it can show up in ways where you feel like you're following in your intuition, but then you notice yourself actually not listening to the first response, and instead you're second guessing yourself all over the place. And a lot of that second guessing starts to deteriorate into doubts, and then it deteriorates into limited beliefs, and then it deteriorates into excuses. And then it starts a vicious cycle where we stop allowing ourselves to trust ourselves and our intuitive strengths. And this one is a slippery slope to watch out for, because when you notice that you have a harder time trusting yourself, or you find that you're doubting yourself, a lot of it is rooted in self-trust. Another one that we can follow into is feeling like you're going through the motions and you're living life as the observer, but it's almost kind of like, and this happens a lot in spiritual awakening, where it's like you're almost dissociated, like you're living above the body. You're kind of in that observer mindset of just going through the motions of your life. And what's actually what it feels like from a place of almost depersonalization or dissociation And that's a lot of D's. And when you think about that as a concept, this disconnection sensation is creating a sense of dissociation and chronic escapism. And what that can lead to is one of the final signs I want to mention here is you find yourself trying to escape all the time. So you find yourself getting stuck in codependent relationships. You get addicted to alcohol and ayahuasca and drugs, and you find yourself reaching for the weed instead of listening to your emotions, and you get stuck in being addicted to people or a relationship, or you're fixating on something for validation. There is a moment where escapism comes in various forms, and this can also be a sign that you are thinking more about them or the drugs or the alcohol or whatever instead of yourself, and you're not giving back to yourself what you actually physically need. And when that occurs, that is also a sign of disconnection from the self. Okay, so those are the main things that I wanted to discuss when it comes to disconnection. We're going to be diving a lot more deeper into this inside of the live event, Reconnect, Return to Self. If you are interested in joining us and saving your seat, I highly recommend showing up on Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. And you can also get on our notification list if you click the link below. And most importantly, the universe is inside of you, and you hold the power to design your life. Until next time.